Okay. The other side that I show, which is the legal side on the right, the reason why I point it out is we have a group that actually licenses technology out of the company. And the IP Ventures unit is the one that has charter for that. They happen to sit in the legal department because they're the ones doing the transaction. But they typically are working with a research organization looking at IP that may or may not find its way in a 3 to 5 year period into something that the product organizations are going to care about, but might have a shelf life. And so we've engaged with the venture community and the entrepreneurs in various parts of the world, actually, some in Ireland and the UK, one in Canada, a couple here in the Valley, where we've instanced 7 new companies that have had first-tier venture capital financing placed into them. There's lots more work that gets done out of that group to license field of use rights to certain kinds of technologies and things like that. But again, I want this to be illustrative of, at a very high level, the company's commitment to working in this manner with the community on a global basis. CFO's office is pointed out just because we drive a broader corporate strategy activity out of there, which is slightly higher level than where we're generally talking in terms of size and scale of engagement. And it's from that kind of an office or an evaluation that we would make larger sized acquisitions in the company. But the smaller sized acquisitions, which to give you a sense of what I mean by large or small, in our world, a large size transaction or acquisition is in excess of $250 million or so dollars spent by us. And below that level, work is done all within these blue boxes and bubbling up through the organization that I manage. And so if there are questions regarding that, we'd be glad to take them when we open things up. Go to the next slide. This is a framework for thinking about the types of techniques and approaches that we use to engage and connect with the community. And then I'm going to close by giving a broader view of how we think about this thing on a global basis. As I said in the previous chart, where I showed the organizational structure, there are product group roundtables that we host and it's typically things that we do with the venture community and occasionally we'll do when we've filtered through and found a set of what we call portfolio companies in a particular domain that have aligned interests with us in some way, shape, or form. So recently we hosted a day around mobility, had a series of the product group execs present. We had, I think, 16 or 18 companies come in after this, again, filtering process. There were companies from Israel, there were a couple companies from France, different places around the world. And then we'll organize that meeting in a way not dissimilar from this kind of a function that you're here visiting today at Plug and Play. But those things have been tuned and filtered. So they're really forums for that deeper conversation where perspective is shared, people can gain some vantage point on how we might work together, or, again, or not, it depends. And out of that process, I would say on an annual basis, we end up engaging with about 150 to 200 companies at that level where there's a deeper interaction. And most of those outcomes or results as a result of those kinds of interactions would be ones where the CEO of the company or the financier who's on the board would proactively nod and say, Microsoft was helpful. And that just is historical context on our process. It's been about 200 per year or so of the 1,000 or more that we actually take a look at. So it just gives you an idea of the scale once again. There's a byproduct of those interactions, which my team does not process directly, but we work with the business units on that, and that is an acquisition. And in those instances, numerically, it's somewhere on the order of, sweet spot would be, say, 10 a year that would be kind of your ilk, if you will, which are relatively early stage venture capital, angel financed entities that are in that typically sub $200 million or so range of acquisition price to Microsoft. The market dynamics and the heat and the competition drive prices, markets and all those things, as you know. So that's, again, just a general scale. The roundtables are typically forums that are where we create the relationship from which those kinds of things can happen. We hold summits and other regional events around the world. We actually hold one annual event here in Silicon Valley because it's a place where I can get our CEO present and have a useful and full day for him. We also do things in the European theater. We hold a summit in Brussels every year. We also do the same thing in India and in China and in Brazil, and we'll be instancing an event in Russia this November as well. So in the major big emerging markets, if you will, we do lots of them regionally, and in local markets, country managers also hold similar kinds of events. I talked really, if you will, about depth and some of the other kinds of things. Because that's sort of the numerics in the funnel that I mentioned. Referrals and introductions. It's not unusual for us to, at a forum like this, or a company that was instanced here at Plug and Play, and to the extent we see some alignment where we can be helpful in a constructive way with the company, we're happy to reach out into the network that we've developed with relationships with the venture community around the world and tee companies up, again, where we can provide context on a useful relationship with Microsoft that'll help them in the market in some way. Typically, sometimes it's technology related. There are other things on the right on the slide that I'll mention in the last slide as well, in and around the local software economy. We do business in over 100 countries around the world. In 60 countries or so, we have a local initiative where we sit down with the leaders in that country, the prime minister, the king, whatever, and have the conversation about how would they like to see software have an impact in their local economy. And there are always third-party studies about the impact Microsoft has within the IT infrastructure in their economy. And we use that as a sounding board for the conversation. And we try and create initiatives that are supportive of that sovereign state's interests. And we do that in partnership with the other parts of Microsoft in country, our public sector group that's typically doing business with the governments in the education sector and things like that. And my team, separate team than the one that works directly with the venture community, but another team drives this very broad global program, which is instanced in every country locally around the world. And I'll show you a map with dots on it, but the key point is there are 60 countries where we have significant initiatives of this ilk in play right now. And it's part of our worldview that, through the magic of software and the internet and the infrastructure and the new devices, the world could be a better place if people have a targeted focus on how the economic impact of software can help their people, and we want to be part of that. We drive interoperability, I mentioned that, and security, I mentioned that up front. There's an alliance framework. We have websites associated with each. One is called the Interop Vendor Alliance. One is called the Secure IT Alliance. Any company here is welcome to take a peek at that site, choose to be a member or not. Large companies, the Oracles, Suns, IBMs of the world participate, Symantec, et cetera, in those alliances that we've helped instance, because the whole premise here of building out the next generation of software with the internet as a core backbone is that we have to have a trust framework that everybody participates in, and we have a big responsibility because we have such a broad footprint with our software. IP Ventures I mentioned. Imagine Cup is sort of the lowest level instance of us working with the university community on a very broad scale. So some of you may know, if you're from abroad, I think it's perhaps less well known in the US because of the scale of the US market, but in many countries around the world, the Imagine Cup is the premier contest for students to engage in and around. There's 6 or 8 categories. There's a website you can take a look at relative to the Microsoft Imagine Cup. And last year the finals were in Paris. This year in July they'll be in Cairo. So they're always instanced in an interesting location. There are about 300 or so teams of students from around the world, from universities in virtually every country, that end up showing up, and it's an Olympic-like contest, if you will, with great outcome and a lot of excitement. And so that's a place, again, if you're looking for talent and you're looking for talent that knows our technologies, again, we can connect you into places there that would be helpful to you. Oops, wrong direction. So I'll close and then open it up for a few questions for people by giving you a perspective. The purple dots up there are places in and around the world where we're paying special attention to what I would say Silicon Valley-like venture capital-backed kinds of startups.